Welcome to another episode of Clarity in Crisis. This is Angela Gibson of Angie Speaks, which is a derivative of E Speaks. And as you know, we've been having these series to help people to navigate this tumultuous time that we're going through. And of course, if we're doing that, we have to talk about finances because that's a huge part of what people are struggling with these days. And of course, with me today, I'm very excited. We have Denny Mendez, who is our financial wealth expert and guide. And he's going to talk to us today about how to become financially independent. Of course, we all want to know that, right? So thank you, Denny, for joining us. And once again, let me just tell the audience a little bit about your background. You have about nearly 20 years on Wall Street, helping people with financial guidance. A lot of your clients are the sports arena, people in the sports management arena or in sportsmanship. And tonight, as you guide us through this process, we're looking forward to your wisdom, and hopefully people will be able to implement some real practicals that we can implement to guide us to get on the road to financial independence. Here at Eve Speaks, we are dogged, determined, and deliberate about becoming the next best version of ourselves. So to that end, we are striving to give you a little more clarity in this crisis. Once again, thank you, Denny, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. What an introduction. How lovely.
I love it. So guys, today, as we talk about, we're going to be focusing on financial independence. And one of the first building blocks of meeting your financial goals is definitely getting out of debt. And last 2 weeks ago, rather, we kind of did an overview of what the building blocks of the complete financial house looks like, and includes getting out of debt, having an emergency fund, finding extra income, having insurance, and planning for retirement. So those 5 building blocks are really important because we all know that if we build our house on the sand, when the wind comes and the waves, we will surely crash. However, if we build it on the rock, the winds may come, the storm, the hurricane, the earthquake, but we will at least survive, right? And there's no doubt that we are going through some earthquakes right now. COVID-19 is no joke.
Absolutely.
So from that perspective, let's focus on the first building block of the financial house a little bit deeper this week, so we can start learning how to become financially independent, getting out of debt. Can you tell me from your own life an experience that you had where you had to get out of debt and what the impact of it was on you before you were able to get out of debt, and how, the before and after, so to speak? It's always good to be able to show the before and after. Tell the audience your story.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you, actually, I went into that twice. So if I didn't learn my lesson the first time, I definitely learned it the second time. The second time wasn't as bad as the first.
Second time was a charm, huh?
Third time was the charm. So, when I first started my career, my early 20s, when you're in your early 20s, you don't really have credit. So you actually get credit offers pretty easily. And I remember my very, very first credit card, now that I'm thinking about it, was I went to a baseball game. I think it was the Mets at the time. I lived in Queens, so we went to a Met game, and they have like the outside kiosk, and they're like, hey, sign up for this credit card, you get a free towel or something like that. And I was like, oh, this towel looks cool. I really want it. And it was an orange towel. I'll never forget, it was an orange towel. And I was like, oh, this is my favorite color. I'm just going to sign up for this application so I can get this towel. And I ended up getting a credit card in the mail. It was like $500 or $1,000.
A towel or tower?
A towel that you dry yourself with.
You bought, sorry.
So I signed up for a credit card for a free towel. How ridiculous is that? But goes to show where my mind state was at the time. So I was excited about the towel. A couple of weeks later, I get this card in the mail, and I was like, oh, it's like $1,000. I think that's what it was at the time. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I was like, oh, let me figure it out. If I spend a couple $100s, what my monthly expenses. And that's how I rationalized it. I was like, oh, if I spend $500, I'm just going to pay, $60 a month. I can definitely handle that. But that's how you start getting into the hole. So you get the first $1,000 and then you're like, all right, you're paying this off. But now what happens is you get another offer and then another offer. And they're like, oh man, there's this beautiful jacket in Macy's I want to get.
Yes,
30% off for a card. Awesome. Let me just sign up for this card. I get 30% off. I'm here thinking I'm winning, but I'm actually losing. Next thing you know, you blink and you're like $20,000 in debt. You know, it's a big number. So, but the thing is, we think about it as like, oh, it's only $60 here. This card is only $50. This card is only $40. And you're like, I can afford it. Oh, I got 20,000 of debt. That's no big deal. I'm paying $200 or $300 a month. I can definitely handle that. But as you start figuring out how much interest is going towards these companies and how much you're actually paying your principal and how much this jacket actually costs you, I was like, holy cow, I'm totally getting robbed. So
at what point in this journey of yours did you realize that, oh my gosh, I've got to make a change?
Of course.
When did the lights come on?
That was it. Once I was paying off these cards and it was like 4, 5, 6 months later, and I'm like, man, these balances are not changing. I was like, what's going on over here? And then that's when I actually started looking at the statements and I was like, all right, how come I'm paying, $300 a month and this balance is not moving? And then that's how I got the real difficult lesson of interest. Like, hey, if you charge something on these cards, you're going to get charged interest. These companies are basically saying, yeah, no problem, we'll give you the money, but you're going to pay us interest for that little, for that little loan. So that was my first haha moment. Like, oh, I got 20 grand of debt. I'm paying 20% on this 20 grand. Guess what? That's $4,000 a year.
Whoa.
So
isn't it crazy how they really entice you to get these cards? I remember the same thing when I was like starting college. It's really enticing. And then when the minute you start owning them, they chase you down like you're a felon. Oh my gosh, it's the worst.
They're your best friend when they want to give it to you. They're like, oh, go take all the credit you want. What? You want another 10,000 here? Have it. But if you don't pay us, we're gonna come after you. And that was the first lesson. And then when I figured out how much I actually had to pay every month to pay it off, I realized it's like triple the amount that I was paying. Because what I was doing like what most people do. We pay the minimum. We're like, I don't want to be late. I don't want to hurt my score. I'm gonna pay the minimum possible. But then that minimum amount was gonna drag into 3 or 4 years of me paying off this debt. And that's if I didn't charge not one soda can on this card anymore. So that's how I realized. I was like, all right, this is ridiculous. So then what I did was I just buckled down and I said, I'm never using these cards anymore. I actually cut them up. Some people like to put them in water in the freezer to, entice them. And I started giving myself a rule. I was like, all right, listen, if I really, really want something, I'm going to wait like a week, maybe 2 weeks to see if I really want whatever this item is. Because, we get the fever. We're like, I want this cup. I'm going to buy it right now. But after a week, nobody cares about it anymore. So as I started,
quench the fever, and then you're able to start making very deliberate decisions about how you're going to spend. If you don't have the cash, you're not going to charge. Is that what you decided?
That's what I decided at the time. But my bigger thought process was like, how do I get out of this hole? Because that's the big deal. I was like, I'm already in this hole. I was like, I'm paying the maximum that I could every month. I wasn't making a lot of money. I was in my 20s. I was like, I'm paying the maximum that I can, and I'm not getting out of this hole. I was like, what do I got to do? So then I started really like looking at my lifestyle. I was like, I'm either going to make more money so I could pay this off quicker, or I have to really lower my lifestyle. What's that mean? It could be, not going out 2 weekends out of the month. It could mean like not doing anything, staying at home, whatever it was at the time. And I was like, this money that I'm saving here, I'm going to pay towards the debt.
So what I hear from you is a level of showing up for yourself, your own commitment to you. But first you have to be aware that those companies weren't doing you any favors by extending this credit to you. But a lot of times we feel somehow privileged that, oh my gosh, they chose me to extend credit to me. We think it's some kind of a honorable thing, when in reality, they are digging a hole for you to bury you. And once you got that awareness, you are able to make a decision to be disciplined about your spending by choosing only to buy when you had the cash versus putting it on credit where the interest rate was ridiculous. And then but tell me something, I'm very curious. How do you go from being in that situation to now being a wealth management advisor?
So I realized that if this is happening to me, this must be happening to a lot of people. And as I started learning more about the stock market and I was getting into the Wall Street game, I started hearing more and more people, especially my community, talking about debt. I have this credit card debt. I owe this person. I owe that person. Especially in our community growing up, it was like, it wasn't just credit cards. It was like, I'm borrowing from my aunt. I'm borrowing from my cousin. I'm borrowing from so-and-so. And they're either charging me interest or guess what? They're calling me every other minute. Like, wait, where's my money? So I was like, there has to be a shift in thinking that's
Right.
making us go into this situation, right? And then I was like, what happens is that either credit or easy access to cash, what it makes us do, it makes us live above our means. Because we got to focus on our income, right? It's our means, it depends on what kind of income we have. And if your income only allows a specific lifestyle, guess what? Getting this credit, getting this loan is going to raise your lifestyle a tiny little bit, but you're going to pay for it at the end.
Mm.
So that is what made me start shifting the mindset. Like, all right, there's something going on over here. And then I realized, like, listen, credit card companies are not dumb. They're in it to make money.
Wow.
They want you to be in as deep of a hole as possible because the more you pay them, the minimum every single month, the more money they're making. So
Wow.
they'll lend you 10,000, but they're making 20,000 on top of that.
So the lesson that we have to learn at this juncture in our talk is that we have to focus on paying ourselves first. Yes?
Always, 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 always.
Pay myself first. And the thing is that even as a business owner, I have to be very cognizant of the fact that, yeah, I may be making the money, but it doesn't mean anything if I don't keep much of it. You know what I mean? So it applies across the board. It really doesn't matter how much money you're making. It's really the mindset around it, right? Am I correct?
That's correct.
At least that's what I've discovered for myself. So it's so easy to tell people, oh, you just need to get out of debt. But what would you say is the most optimum way for people to get on this journey to get out of debt? It's like saying, get out of the quicksand. But then you have the rent due, and you have the mortgage, and then you have the school fee, and you have you have to pay the credit cards that you already, you know, took the cards out, those debt that you have to pay that off. And then you have to pay for the gas, and the car broke down. I mean, it's like literally quicksand. So you find yourself trying to crawl out of something that it almost feels impossible. At least I felt like that. I remember when I got married, I was $50,000 in debt.
Ooh,
my husband was debt free. So I came in with the baggage, and he was just like, my credit score is almost 800. You know, he was good. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, how am I even going to get out of this?
Yeah.
But it was at that point that I started a business. So that there's something to be said too for starting a business.
Agreed.
And going for it, right?
I agree 100%.
Yeah, but before we go there, well, I wanted you to tell the audience how, what is the best or more optimum way to get out of debt? What would you say they should do besides paying off the credit card debt? I mean, of course, that's important.
Paying off the credit card debt is like saying, hey, go get in shape, right? Like, yeah, okay, yeah, we want to get in shape. That sounds very easy, but you need the steps to be able to do that. And I would say step number one is you got to know exactly what you owe. You got to write things down, keep an Excel spreadsheet. I don't care how you do it, as long as you know whom you owe, how much you owe, and what kind of schedule you have.
Who you owe, what you owe, and what kind of schedule you have. Yeah. Must be aware.
Correct. Are you paying the 1st? Are you paying on the 15th? Are you paying on the 20th? Whatever. You got to know your schedule, because if you're a day late, 10 days late, 20 days late, that makes a huge difference on your credit score. We're not going to talk about that now, but these are the things that I look for. How much you owe, who do you owe, and what kind of schedule you have. Okay. Then you can even dig deeper. Now you're like, hey, which credit card or which debt do I have the highest interest on? Which one has the highest payments? Which one has the lowest payments? And once you have that information in front of you, now you can kind of decide which route as far as debt payoff you want to do. Because some people may have 2 cards with huge balances. Mm-hmm. Some people may have 7 cards with lower balances. They may both owe the same thing, but what happens is the guy that has 5 or 7 cards, he's paying $200 per card. Now he's paying $1,400 a month, where the other person is paying maybe $500 a month. So you got to know exactly what you're working with. Once you know what you're working with, then there's a couple of different options you can go down.
So again, the awareness factor seems really huge. That's what I'm hearing a lot. That keeps
Always.
repeating. You have to know where you are first before you can decide where you're going. So just jump in and start paying off debt is just not the way to do it. You're saying know who you owe, the schedule, and what was the other thing?
You got to know who you owe, how much you owe,
How much
and
you
the
owe,
schedule. Yeah,
and the schedule.
schedule.
So that's the awareness factor, and then you proceed from there. What
Look,
else?
I was doing it wrong in the beginning. I was like, I owe all these people. I'm just gonna pay as much as I can. I got an extra 100. I'm gonna throw it over here. An extra 200. I'm gonna throw it over there. I was just going crazy. But I realized I wasn't making much of an impact. So you got to come up with a plan.
Right.
So there's two basic methods when it comes to paying off debt. There's two basic methods. Number one is the avalanche method. The avalanche method means that you write down all your debt. And what you do is you're going to focus on the card that has the highest interest first. The reason you want the one that has the highest interest first is because that one is the one you're losing the most on. That's the one that the credit card companies or whoever loaned you the money, they're making the most off you because it's the highest interest. So logically, you want to pay that one off first. Sometimes that doesn't work out, and I'll tell you why, is because that one may have the highest balance. So your highest balance card may have the highest interest. So what happens is you're focusing so much on that large card that these little ones are kind of like monkeys on your back. You're still making these small payments on these smaller cards, and you're trying to focus on this big one. So my preferred method, I call it the snowball method. The snowball method is the same thing. You write down all your debt, but you pay off the smallest balance first. And what you do is the other balances, so you take the smallest balance, pay as much as you can towards that, and the other ones you're just going to focus on the minimum. Whatever the minimum is, you're going to pay that minimum.
Somebody wants to put you on the spot right here before you carry on. And an anonymous attendee asked this question. They said, how did you get into debt the second time, Mr. Wealth Management?
Good question.
Didn't you learn the first time?
Good question. So what happened was, and I'll give you the story, right? So I got out of debt. I got knocked off that 20,000. It was amazing. Then as I got older, I started having a family. I started having kids, and I started, having to kind of stand on my own 2 feet. So what happens is now you need to get things, at least I thought, I was like, now you need to get things to manage your lifestyle. And I was like, hey, I need to furnish my apartment. I need to get a car, an SUV, because I have a 10-month-old and I need the best car possible. So if anybody comes in and rams into me, my baby's safe, just thinking craziness. So I kind of went into the same habit, but this time I had a plan. I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I was like, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to pay off. This is going to be my payoff schedule. So I'm going to get this couch. I'm going to get this TV. I'm going to get this car, but nothing else is happening for the next 12 months until I pay these things off. So I became very disciplined after the first time around. And let me tell you, I'm a person that I really dislike debt. I don't like debt for nothing, but it's more of a psychological thing because we all need debt a little bit just to get good credit. But I just don't like it anymore. I was like, if I can't pay off this couch cash, I don't even want it. So, but listen, we can talk more into like how some debt is actually very good for you. You just have to have a schedule of paying things off.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how it happened the second time.
Well, thanks for your transparency. That's very much admired. So carry on by telling us what you were telling us before about the different types of.
Yes. So I gave you the
avalanche
avalanche.
method.
Now the snowball method. Avalanche is highest interest first, and then you focus to the lowest interest. I like the snowball method because, again, I like to play mind games, and psychologically, it really helps people and it motivates them. Because if you pay off the smallest balance first and do the other ones, the minimum amount due, what happens is now instead of owing 7 cards, now you only owe 6 cards, and now you feel better. Now you're like, okay, now I only owe 6. Now what happens is you're going to focus on the next smallest balance. All the other ones you pay the minimum, but you're going to focus all that extra money from the first card that you already paid off. Now you're going to pay it towards the second card. Focus on that until that second card is paid off. Guess what? Now you went from 7 cards to 5 cards. Then you go down to 4 cards and then 3 cards. And then guess what? Now once you start seeing these cards with 0 balances, it gives you a motivational factor. I always like to compare it to working out. If you're working out and you come in like out of shape, your pants don't fit. I mean, your neck is not fitting through your shirts, but you work out Exactly. You work out, you eat right, and you're like, oh, this really sucks in the beginning. Like I'm just sweating. I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. But then one day, you put on your pants, and that belt buckle is one hole closer. You're like, oh, okay, I'm doing something right. And what happens is that motivates you. Now you're like, all right, you know what? I'm not gonna eat the sandwich. I'm gonna eat the salad because
Mhm.
I'm seeing progress. So it's the
Yeah.
same thing with the snowball method. You're seeing progress. So it makes people want to get out of the debt faster. And I've noticed, at least in my experience, that method versus the avalanche method has a much higher success rate because
Mhm.
psychologically people want to do better.
Right. That makes sense. I love to feel like I'm making progress, especially when I
Yeah,
have a big thing in front of me. I feel like I'm making progress and I say it's doable. Otherwise, I just get stuck in paralysis. Like,
yeah, yeah. So imagine, I'm gonna give you an example. Imagine you're out of shape and you're like, I want abs. Like that's my goal is I want abs, right? And you're out of shape. You've never worked out a day in your life, and you've always eaten poorly. It's
mm,
gonna take you a while to get those abs. But if that's your only focus and you're like, I'm waking up every day and I don't have the abs, you may feel discouraged. But if you give yourself tiny goals, hey, let's just focus on losing 5 pounds. Let's focus on lowering our belt buckle a little bit. Let's focus on doing 10 push-ups versus 5 push-ups. And you
mhm.
give yourself tiny goals, now you just start pushing yourself harder and you get motivated.
Okay. But in light of the fact that we have COVID-19 going on, and truthfully, a lot of people are losing their jobs,
Yep.
and it's really hard. I mean,
Very.
millions. How do you tell people to just pay off their debt? I mean,
It's hard. Everybody's situation is different, right? So
uh,
with COVID-19, listen, that's just thrown the entire planet into a loop. But there's a lot of options that are available to people. So if you fall into like financial hardship, you actually have access right now to your retirement plans. If you're under 59 and a half, if you take out your retirement on a regular year, not a COVID-19 year, if you take out money from your retirement plan pre 59 and a half, you get hit with penalties and you
mhm.
got to pay your taxes that year. This year, they waived that. If you've been affected by COVID, if you have been affected, adversely financially because of this whole virus thing that's going on, and almost everybody has,
Mhm.
you have access to your retirement plan, and A, the penalty is waived, and B, those taxes that you owe, you have 3 years to pay them off. So
That's
you pay,
awesome news.
yes. So they actually are giving people incentives like, hey, listen, if you're running into a financial hardship, I'm going to give you access to your money and the government's not going to kill you on it. Then we're not going to pay you with the penalty and you take your time paying us our taxes.
And they're giving you 3 years?
3 years to pay it off.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, there you go. We learn something new every day.
I wasn't paying attention to my pension or my 401k. But so that's good. That's a great tip right there. What else would you say that people would need to know to get out of the debt? Those two big building blocks of getting out of debt. Do you find that those are the most effective? Uh,
On getting out of debt, yes. I would say those two are the biggest ones, the avalanche or the snowball. Focus on the snowball because I'm telling you, it has a higher success rate. Now, another thing is, let's say you get out of debt or you paid off half your debt, you paid off a quarter of your debt.
mhm.
One thing you got to focus on so you don't fall back into the same trap is you have to really think about where your debt is going or what is it for? Is my debt going to something shiny that's just going to make me feel good for a little while and
Mhm.
make me look pretty for a little bit, and then I just got to pay off, much more money than I actually originally spent on it? Or is this debt going to be something that's going to give me a return? Am I
Mhm.
paying the debt for a liability, or am I using this debt for an asset? An asset could
Ah,
be
so it sounds like
building
two
a business.
critical questions to ask. And
Correct.
I think it's always important for people to ask the right questions, because when we ask ourselves the right questions, we get better answers as
Yep.
opposed to just asking for the answer. So the
Yep.
question is this debt
For a liability,
for a liability? And the liability is what?
liability could be anything that's not bringing you any assets, not bringing you any money. You're buying yourself clothes, you're buying yourself a TV, you're buying yourself just stuff to make yourself feel better, but it's not really improving your lifestyle.
So liability doesn't give you any return on investment,
No
basically.
return.
No, you're just burning money.
You're
So
just
you ask
burning money.
yourself, is this debt that I'm about to get into going to be a situation where I am burning money versus what's the
An
second thing?
asset. It could be using your debt for an asset. I'm
Using your
gonna
money for an asset. Is this money, is this debt I'm about to get into going to give me is it going to be an asset to my lifestyle, to my being, to my family, to my legacy? A lot of times, I mean, I've been caught up in this where I just want to buy something because it looks good. Oh, that shoe.
Oh, I still do that.
Hot. Let me get them shoes.
Yeah.
But the critical questions to ask is, will this be an asset or will it be a liability?
Correct.
And so once you ask yourself those two very, very critical questions, what's the next step, Mr. Wealth Manager?
But now once you ask yourself that question, you really know the answer already. Most people are going to say, hey, I want to get into debt for an asset. And what does that mean? It could be, building a business. It could mean like, hey, I'm going to sell things on eBay. I'm going to buy baseball cards and sell it on eBay for a profit. It could be anything. But at least you know that you're going to get into debt, and you know that something's going to come back to pay off that debt and give you a bit of a return on top of that. Mm-hmm. So it's not so much of just getting out of the debt, it's also staying out of the debt and increasing your net worth. I tell people the same thing. Listen, life is simple. If you're making whatever the dollar amount is and you're realizing like, man, I keep having more and more debt every year, you have two options. You're either going to make more money to sustain that lifestyle that you want, that you keep going into debt for, or you got to lower your lifestyle. Don't get the Mercedes, get the Honda. Yeah, maybe it might suck. It might not have a couple of extra features, but you know what? Your bank account is going to be happy, as well as your monthly income.
Very, very, very good. What else would you want people to know in this journey of getting out of debt? So from what I hear from you, a little while ago, you're saying that there are actually some debt that is worth getting into.
Absolutely.
The ones that are going to bring you the assets. So what are some examples? Well, you kind of gave us a couple, getting into a business. Okay. Some examples of getting into debt that's going to help to build your legacy or bring you assets.
Correct.
Buying a home could be one of them, yes.
Real estate is a big one. Almost very, very few real estate investors buy real estate cash. And the only time they're going to buy it cash is like if they really want to buy that property and they don't want anybody else to get their hands on it. But most of them just leverage. And what I mean by leverage is that they're going to take the bank's money to buy that piece of real estate. Why would they use their money? They'll use their money for something else. They'll use the bank's money. The rates are so low right now, and they'll buy that asset. So they're getting into debt. It could be substantial debt, but they understand that like, okay, I'm using this debt. I'm going to build up this property. It could be my home. It could be an investment property, but I know I'm getting an asset for it. There's something.
I just heard you say something. That I think I want to point out. It sounds like COVID-19 has an opportunity. You said the rate is so low right now.
Yep.
And why is that?
So right now, you can't have high rates because what happens is businesses still need to borrow money. Businesses still need to borrow from the government. They need to borrow from banks to keep their businesses running. If the rates are too high, businesses are not going to survive. Because what's happening is there's no business out there for these guys. So they're not going to borrow money from the banks if the rates are too high. So what happened was, this happened, over 10 years ago, 2008. They brought the rates down so low because they're like, hey, we need to keep business running. And if the rates are high, guess what? The small businessman, Main Street, is not going to borrow from us. So kept the rates low, and they've just kept it low for a while. And then this new pandemic hit, and they're like, oh, okay, now we really can't raise rates. We got to keep it low because people need to be able to borrow to keep their lifestyles going. And it's great for people that have real estate. So if you have a home, if you have an investment property, look at your rates, look at your mortgage statement and check out your rates because it might be a good time to refinance. If you're over 4.5%, 4%, mid fours, I would say, and higher, definitely refinance. Because right now you can get things in the high twos or low threes. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that monthly payment, believe me, it's a big difference.
So the other lesson I'm hearing in this is that in every adversity, there is an opportunity.
Always.
And I hear opportunity right there. You can start a business. A lot of people are saying, oh, we're going to start a business and I ain't got no money. Well, you're saying, if you look and ask questions, and that's why we have you on, the people want to reach out to us via the Eve Speaks platform, you will have access to Denny Mendez. Just send us an inbox message or on our Facebook page, Angie Speaks, and he'll be willing to have a consultation with you to discuss your financial house, to get it on the rock, if it's not already on there. And if it's on the sand, we can certainly do some reconstruction, yes?
Always, always.
You can certainly do some reconstruction. So that's really a great tip. We're winding down because it's been about 40 minutes since we're on, and we all know that school begins for my children tomorrow. But I'm really grateful. So for you too.
Yeah.
We're very grateful for the opportunity to talk about how we can get on the road to financial independence. So if you had to give an overview to people as we sign off, for them to like go back and reflect on, what would you want them to take away? Number one, it would be the fact there's two ways to get out of debt. And you said talk about avalanche method and the snowball method. And you said the snowball method was the best way because
higher success.
Higher success. Because, tell them again.
Psychologically, people want to see progress. So if you get multiple cards and you knock off one at a time, you feel good, you're going to want to keep that going.
Wonderful. And another thing that you talked about, help me out because I may have forgotten some of them, was the fact that
how to use your debt. Are you using your debt? Yep. Are you using your debt for a liability or are you using it for an asset?
You said debt, a liability, or an asset. So not all debt is bad debt. So it's okay to get into debt if you're going to buy a house.
Correct. And even buying a car. Listen, maybe you want to be an Uber driver and moonlight that at night. And you're like, hey, I want to make a couple of extra bucks. All right, I'll get into debt for this. I know I got to work 6 months to pay it off or whatever the time frame is. But that's still an asset. A lot of people say cars are a liability, but if you're using your car to make money, is it really?
Great point. Because I always thought of a car as a liability because it just seems like it's just burning. It's depreciating even before you leave the lot. But you're telling me that if it's to start a business like Uber, yeah, that makes sense. And then we talked about the opportunity that exists within COVID, and that is that interest rates are really low right now. So it's a good time to
refinance your homes. It's a good time to have conversations. If you have a lot of debt, have conversations with the credit card companies. Maybe they're negotiating right now. Rates are so low, and they're always going to give you pushback. They're going to hey, what? You're telling Angela's coming to me and you're telling me I want to make less money? No, I want to make more money off Angela. But if you continue having a forceful conversations with the companies, they may buckle and they may want to lower your rates because at the end of the day, they want you to keep paying. So if there's a threat that you will stop paying, they'd rather say, I'd rather cut this interest rate in half and continue getting payments and keep the rate the same and risk not getting anything.
And another really important thing I heard you talk about was the fact that you can borrow from your retirement fund right now.
Yep. So you can borrow from your 401k or any of your retirement plans. If you've been affected by COVID, which again, almost everyone has, you're staying home and the kids are homeschooling and they're not going into school, guess what? Now you're being affected. So if you are adversely affected by COVID, you actually can take money out of your retirement plan, whether it's a traditional IRA, 401k, regardless of where it's held, and not pay the penalty and have 3 years to pay the taxes.
Wonderful. I think that's a lot to cover for 30 minutes or so. So I'm going to say, let's sign off. And if you have any questions, go ahead and send them in the chat or the comment box. We'll be more than happy to give you access to Denny Mendez, who again has over 20 years or nearly 20 years on Wall Street as a wealth management advisor. He is the right guy for this job.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Denny, do you have any last words?
Nope. Everybody just stay cool, stay safe and sane during these crazy times.
And thank you so much for joining us in another episode of Clarity in Crisis, where we are dogged, deliberate, and determined to become the next best version of ourselves. You can follow us on Instagram at Angela Speaks, and Angela Gibson Speaks rather. And Denny, what's your Instagram account? You want to tell us?
Mine is Den Mendez, D-E-N Mendez.
D-E-N Mendez. Is that what you said?
That's right.
All righty. So until then, next time we will be talking about having an emergency fund and digging deeper into that, because we're going over the building blocks of building a strong financial house. So thank you for joining us in this episode and continue to strive to be the next best version of you. Bye-bye. Thanks, Denny.
Thank you. Bye.